Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over my most recent article titled The Moral Vacuum: Consent, Religion, and the Crisis of Meaning. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. All are fine, society tells us, as long as you consent. Well, except for maybe rock and roll. Your Apple Watch will warn you if you're listening to music too loud, after all. But sex and drugs, as long as you engage in them consensually, you're not allowed to be questioned by anybody. But is that good for us? Why are we not allowed to separate out the consensual from the moral? This discussion has started to take off in recent days, spurred by two main controversies. The first is the Diddy trial, and the second is the leaked sex tape of journalist Glenn Greenwald. So let's start with Diddy. His case is full of a multitude of allegations, including allegations of sexual trafficking and sexual relationships with minors. While he is denying anything to do with minors, his broader defense is that everything was done consensually. And for the sake of argument, let's take his defense at face value and assume that it's true. He didn't do anything with minors, and everything else was consensual. Does that absolve him from moral wrongdoing? I think most people would say no, it doesn't. But why not? If it was consensual, what's the problem? Then there's Glenn Greenwald. Before this controversy, I'd only heard of Glenn Greenwald in passing. I don't know what side he's on politically or what he believes about anything, and quite frankly, that doesn't matter here. What matters is what happened, and more importantly, his defense of what happened. So he filmed himself having sex with a male prostitute, and the video somehow got leaked online. According to comments I've seen, the video was kind of wild. It included maid outfits, drugs, domination, those sorts of things. And to make matters worse, Greenwald has 3 kids at home. So he defended his actions by saying that he is, quote, proud of his private life and that the actions were consensual, as if that should absolve him from all discussion online. If he and the other man consented, what's the problem? A few online commentators, like the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh, are making specific points about children being in the home with someone engaging in those sorts of acts. And while I do tend to agree with Matt's points, I want to focus on something else that both the Diddy and the Greenwald controversies highlight: a general societal ill, the blurred line between consent and morality. I've seen many right-leaning people online make the simple statement that consent does not equal morality. That is obviously true. But why does that even need to be said? Because, over the past decade or so, society has conflated the two things. If something is consensual, society deems it as morally acceptable. And on the flip side, anything you do is moral as long as it is consensual. But going back to our Diddy hypothetical, assume that he is telling the truth, that everything he did was consensual. Most people would still think that Diddy did something wrong, even if it turns out that everything was consensual. But because society has determined that consent is equal to morality, society has lost the words to explain why Diddy's actions would be morally wrong if there was consent. But how did we get here? Why does society struggle to condemn consensual acts that still feel wrong? It all has to do with the loss of religion. With the loss of faith, we have lost the vocabulary to judge actions that are harmful. Instead, consent has become king. Consent is the only moral framework we have to judge actions by. Now, let's talk about the decline of religion. According to Pew Research, the number of Americans who identify as religious has been steadily decreasing over the past few decades. Axios reports that now only 45% of adults aged 18 through 29 identify as Christian, compared to 78% of adults aged 65 or older. But what does this decline in religiosity mean for the world, and why does it matter? So, probably about 5 years ago now, I discovered Jordan Peterson's work and began really diving into it. While many people have some sort of feeling about Peterson and what he's doing today, I believe that his lecture series on Genesis is truly fascinating work. In the introduction to his series, he talks about why he, who was non-religious at the time, became so interested in the Bible. He found it interesting this book and the stories therein have survived thousands and thousands of years. His simple question was, why? Why did this book survive so long? His answer was that the stories must be true. Not that the stories happened exactly as written, but that the lessons imbued in the stories must be true. In his series, he seeks to uncover the ancient truths embedded in the biblical stories. The truth about human behavior and the consequences of our actions. What becomes clear from his series is that the Bible and the stories therein have survived so long because they get to the truth of human nature. They tell us what humans should be, what we should do, how we should live, the relationships we should cherish, the actions we should avoid, the things we should hold dear. Above all, it gives us a moral framework, a framework that will help us flourish in our lives. Biblical virtues, such as honesty, fidelity, compassion, they transcend individual consent. These aren't arbitrary rules, but distilled wisdom about human flourishing, passed down through thousands and thousands of years of generations. With religion, you aren't just losing a sense of a higher power. You lose moral direction and as a result fall into a type of moral relativity. Your moral worldview becomes tethered only to what society currently deems acceptable. Without a transcendent foundation, there's no reason to hold firm to your beliefs, because there are no lasting consequences other than fleeting societal judgments if you fail. So society has opted to agree to only the most basic level of morality possible: consent. In Diddy's case, we do see another societal framework at play: the legal system. If his actions were technically consensual, but he still ends up in jail for other reasons, that outcome allows society to avoid examining the limits of consent as a moral standard. People can point to the fact that he broke the law and feel satisfied that justice was served, never having to wrestle with the deeper question of whether consent alone is enough. But if Diddy is acquitted, if everything he did was legal and consensual, society is left exposed, unable to articulate why his actions still feel wrong. That's when the cracks in the consent is king morality code become impossible to ignore. Religion once gave us a vocabulary for discussing virtue, vice, and the common good. We could all discuss what is right and wrong and understand each other, because we all shared a higher power. We understood that actions that harm us long term are immoral, and it was okay to talk about it. But now, with so much of the world, especially the younger generation, losing this shared moral framework, we are left with no way to discuss right and wrong with one another. The only thing we can all agree on is consent. If Glenn Greenwald hired a male prostitute and ingested meth while raising 3 kids, but it was all consensual, why is that wrong? The adults all consented after all. If he's okay with his kids taking in his moral framework, one that he says he's proud of, why should we care? If Diddy had drug-fueled sex parties, who cares? The adults all consented. So is there any problem? And even when it comes to the minors that were possibly there, the non-religious argument always circles back to consent. Minors can't legally give consent, so that's where the line is drawn. But what if the law set the age of consent at, say, 14, the way some European countries have it? If our only standard is consent, then changing the law would suddenly make those same acts acceptable. Those who believe that consent is all that matters would be left with no way to explain why Diddy's parties were wrong if everyone involved met the legal age. It leaves us as a society morally adrift, unable to articulate why some actions are wrong, even when, deep down, we know that they are. For the religious, morality isn't just about following rules because God says so. It's about drawing on a tradition that has, over thousands of years, identified what helps people and communities flourish. The stories and teachings found in religious texts aren't just arbitrary. They're reflections on what builds trust, nurtures relationships, and creates a life worth living. Even if you aren't religious, there's value in recognizing that these frameworks offer more than just prohibitions. They encourage us to look beyond momentary pleasure and consider the kind of legacy we leave, the strength of our relationships, and the impact we have on others. A life built only on consent and personal satisfaction often ends up feeling empty, while a life built on deeper virtues offers meaning and fulfillment. In the end, a society that loses its moral vocabulary is left unable to explain why some things are wrong, even when they clearly are. We need more than consent. We need wisdom about what it means to live well. I want to hear what you think about this. Is consent a valid moral framework? Or do we need something more? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this discussion, hit like, subscribe, share this video. All my videos are originally articles on Substack, so I'll include a link to my Substack and my Twitter page in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.